Hello and welcome back to the Landscape of the Year presentations. We are still in Abu Dhabi. Al-Faye Park will be presented by SLA, a Danish office for landscape architecture, and I'm kindly asking the speaker to begin the presentation. Thank you.
Well, thank you. This is Rasmus Astrup here from SLA, joining from Copenhagen. First of all, I would like to thank for this honorful award and being able to be here. I will do an introduction to the park that is called Al-Faye. Al-Faye is Arabic and it means shadow, and it's referring to the shadow of the tree. It's a biodiversity park and it's one of the first of its kind. But before I dive into the park itself, I would like to explain a little bit about our internal approach here at SLA. We are an interdisciplinary design studio. We have biologists, sociologists, and anthropologists, and we work with that knowledge. And the first time I came to UAE or Abu Dhabi, I remember I had this, to be frank, idea that it was all something that was made up. It was a desert country, and everything was not real, a little bit artificial, to be honest. And of course, that was completely wrong. I suddenly discovered that the nature in UAE is very rich and very amazing. And this is the GAF tree. This is the national tree of UAE. It has a root system that likes to grow 30 meters away from the stem. It actually voluntarily grow in the desert. And why is that important? That is important because here in SLA, we work with nature. We call it city nature because it's not outside, it's in the cities, it's inside the cities. And to be able to do that, you need to have knowledge. You need to have knowledge of the local species. You need to have technical skills. Of course, there's an aesthetic value as well. And we find that as a key element in all our design. We actually think that nature is deeply embedded in every nation's culture. And that was a milestone for us in this project in Abu Dhabi. We also think that the biggest crisis in the world right now is the biodiversity crisis. It's not the pandemic. It's way bigger. We cannot get back from the biodiversity crisis if it happens. And every city can actually support that. So this is also a project that shows that a city like Abu Dhabi has a big contribution to the biodiversity demands that we have and are fronting. So I think that is really important. But we couldn't do that because we didn't have that knowledge. We couldn't deliver that design. So what we did was that we needed to gain that knowledge. There was a lot of books in Arabic. We couldn't read them. So we spent an entire year mapping all the species of UAE. There's around 700 species. Wrote a book for ourselves internally, invested that, and now we understand what habitat they are part of, how do they grow, which kind of conditions do they prefer. And that knowledge then turned into this park, Al-Faye, which is a biodiversity park. It's a community park for a residential area on an island called Reem Island. It holds a lot of social informality. And I also think it's really one of the first parks that I have seen that have no lawns, because there's no lawns in nature. That's only something that we human beings invented. So it's a very unique park in the way that you can go and explore things, but it's also an activity park. It looked like this. So the starting point was actually a former excavation for a basement, because it was previously supposed to be a building. And that topography was a good starting point. You, as a designer, you're always seeking for this little hint of existing conditions that you can use. And here the topography was a good idea because we can, of course, reduce the amount of soil, sand to be excavated, but also take advantage, because if you design closely and carefully with that existing topography, you can create an optimized microclimate with the lower points. you can create an spatial experience that we wanted to achieve here, because it was a program from the client to say we need a sports park, an activity park. We said, why don't we do a sports park in a forest? So that was how we came up with this idea, because nature and sports activities are so strong social drivers. The nature also supports a cultural link. It supports the microclimate, so it's more comfortable to make all the activities, but in together it provides informality. This is the entrance to the park. As you can see, there's a space, and you can never oversee the entire park. So we are controlling the experience, so it actually feels very big. Like you can go back and see in ancient Chinese and Japanese gardens, they make small spaces look bigger. There are some of the same ideas, but it's both made of the control of the flow and of course the spatial experience from the retaining walls. You can see here how it's also a mix of this forest and the sports activities in a frame where it seems like one unifying thing, a big contribution. There's a lot of school kids that use, there's a school next by. So before and after school activities are really important part. And then what you can see here is the forest track. So you can see there's both a formal spine of activities in this concrete slab, and then there's actually a more informal one that we call a forest track. A forest track where you can go in and sit and have a coffee or a glass of water and relax. But it's also a place where kids actually run in. So even though there's a lot of playgrounds, we have a lot of kids running around in the forest, as we call it. And then of course the sports activities, as you can see here, it's always framed by nature itself. It is there to optimize that, and you feel like you kind of forget the city. Unfortunately, I don't have the movie with me today, but the soundscape in this park is amazing, both because of the kids that play around, but also because of the birds. There are so many birds. You can see here that there's a lot of young kids that use it in the evening. It has a very significant light design because parks are often used in the evenings. But I think that's an important point I want to say in the mix between here. What we managed to do was that next to these kids, there's a place where the elderly like to sit. There's table tennis that is actually an elder group. There is badminton and volley that the women, and especially in parks today globally, it's often male driven, but there's a lot of activities here that also fits the young female people that would like to use the park. So there's a big mix of genders, of ages, and so on that uses the park, and they see each other, they engage with each other, and it's in a very informal way. So that social value is quite strong. Then of course the planting, it's not just some green. You saw the book before. It's embedded in a deep knowledge and understanding. This is the planting plan. And here you have a picture that I love myself. I know it's our project, but it's just showing that this is a character that you could actually find naturally if you move outside of the city of Abu Dhabi. You could get the feeling that you get from this picture. And now it is inside the city. So it's really the DNA and the culture and a celebration of the nature of UAE that we have managed to get right in the heart of the city. And that's important. People shouldn't walk around in landscapes that are not referring to their own nature and their own culture. So there is a learning thing here in this park as well. And speaking of learning, the learning that SLA went through, it's crazy. You can see here I'm standing in my flip-flops in the desert nursery. To transplant a tree from a desert nursery into the city took us so much investigation, but if we managed to do it with only less than 5% mortality, I'm just saying there's a technical knowledge here that is really amazing, and that came from the locals. We don't have that knowledge. So when we work abroad, we've discovered that amazing knowledge represented in the country, all the amazing people that knew so much. So the learning we bring back to Denmark when we do these projects and the collaboration is quite inspiring and a very pleasant thing to do. It takes 7 weeks. It's very different from when you order a tree from a plant nursery in the Netherlands or in Denmark. But there is a system and it does work. And remember, UAE has no soil. It's all sand. So because it is all sand, what happens when you irrigate in sand? If you played in a sand pit yourself when you were a kid, you know that it doesn't stay there. And I will speed up because of time, I can see. But we managed to add this material called seal plant to the soil. We did hydrozoning. So those habitats that I talked about before, we are planting according to that because some habitats need more water than others. We're using the topography because there are actually surface water because of the temperature differences, and the lower points is where we have the most water demands, and that is also aligned with the planting plan. So everything is carefully planned and organized. Of course, it's artificial, it is city nature, but we are kind of working with nature and not against it, and that is why we have all these beautiful effects out of it, with the soundscape of the birds, with the nice and lower irrigation, 40% lower irrigation than normally. We have a high biodiversity, a high life of birds, and that is really amazing. And then again, this forest track that kids are now running around, not just playing with conventional playground equipment, but actually running around in this. This is also where a lot of elderly young people like to sit. I've seen on Instagram that people are posting their Gucci bags and their other accessories in nature. Imagine that we can now get nature to be cool. That's what we need. So here you can see some
Thank you,
pictures.
Rasmussen. I'm being reminded by the organizers that we need to wrap it up because
Can I say
for the
one last thing? Can I say one last thing?
Yeah, sure.
So this is the last thing. This is an example. When you do a biodiversity park, you are doing a paradigm shift. You cannot follow the maintenance guides. Everything is new. So we didn't expect the amount of bird nests that came. It wasn't a problem, but of course the bees also move into a biodiversity park. So even under construction, beehives start to happen. There's no manual. People started to have fear because we are actually separating ourselves from nature. And every time they took down a beehive, a new one appeared. And now they have found a system of zones where bees can actually also live in the park and still have people feeling safely. So I think this is an example also that we need to rethink our understanding of nature and how to socialize in these biodiversity parks. Thank you for giving me some extra time.
Thank you, Rasmus. It's a wonderful project, so generous. I really need to say this, that is generous to all kinds of groups of society, also to the plant and animal species, and congratulations for this really great achievement. I almost don't have any questions because it's quite clear what the project does and how it works, but I would first kindly ask you if you can expand just a little bit on the water, on the irrigation. You said 40% less than what is usually, but can you tell a little bit more about that, please?
Yes. So the key, I mean, there's a lot of water in UAE, groundwater, but it's mostly salty. And of course, water is a very important element. The first step to work with water consumption, first of all, it's irrigated with recycled gray water. But to reduce irrigation is about selecting the right species of plants. For instance, the GAF tree and the tamarics and other species like that. So the species, then it's about how to organize these planting together in what we call habitats. So they support each other. Then it's about adding additives to the sand. So you have something that can retain and hold on to the water. That is why we are having these seal plant elements in the sand. And thirdly, I would also say having the latest and smartest technology of irrigation systems. This is really where the newest technology plays a significant role. And all in all, these are the elements. Over time, we are suggesting to reduce the water consumption in the park. So we are training, so to speak, the plants to grow more naturally and forcing them to find to adapt more instead of getting them used to a high amount of water. But of course, water for irrigation is a very big thing. It's an essential thing, and here we have done everything's possible of what we could to reduce it and still having a lush park.
Thank you so much. Lily, do you have any questions for Rasmus?
Also thrilled by that presentation, and it's funny to put a biodiversity park in the middle of Abu Dhabi. It's kind of sensitive audacity to try this, which is a nice combination of things. It's pretty audacious. It's great to see it. I just a little bit about the details and the material choice in the hardscape. If you could tell us a little bit more about why you picked these materials, where they come from, and any key details you want to pick out.
Yeah. So for the material, the biggest material is of course sand. That was already there. We had to add some other sand with nutrients in it. But for the pavement, it's important to work with a very light surface with a very high reflection, because then the albedo effect, as it's called, sends back the light and doesn't heat up. So the whole selection of materials has really been important for us, and you can actually feel that. You can feel certain places in the park has a very much lower and nicer temperature than outside. So that is definitely something that it has been a driver for us in the sense of making selection. And then of course there's another thing you need to work with, that is the UV influence. People don't understand how much that is actually, how hard that is on materials. So there's both a hardness to that, but it's basically a very simple, light surface of in situ casted concrete, and then the rest is just sand. And then if I can continue, then the idea is to have all the activities. You can see the table tennis here. They of course have some soft surface around them, safety surface of rubber, but it's all collected and merged into this activity spine. So the idea was to merge and everything into this activity spine and let nature be free outside. So it was also, that is why the design distinctly differentiates between the paved activities and nature. So it looks like there was a forest, and then we carved out an activity spine inside the forest, not opposite. That is the feeling you get from being there.
I have a quick question, please.
Sorry.
I was just wondering, I presume there are oases in Abu Dhabi. I've never been, so I don't really know. But and it's the kind of flora that you get here, is that kind of representative? And also, could you learn anything from the way that oases occur in the way that you actually laid it out? I'm just asking because I'm afraid I'm not aware of. Have never been in a real oasis, but I presume, having seen them at a distance, that there might be lessons that one can learn.
Yes, and one of the lessons is definitely the biggest takeout. There is 11. The biggest oases are in Al Ain, which is further in, but still it's part of. This project is made for the municipality of Abu Dhabi, and Al Ain is also part of that. But in Al Ain, the oases are primarily production of dates. But the learning you have from those and that we got was the layer. There is a top layer in the oasis. It's often palm trees, and then there's a second layer, which could be more fruit trees, and then there is the shrubs and that system where they protect each other is definitely a key learning. I mean, and it goes back thousands of years. And I think again that's the most amazing part of this project, to have these conversations with people about the history and the knowledge and the learning, which is their culture. It was so. I suppose it's also the
intensification, of the use of the land too, so that you have these multi-stories, and it's this idea of having so many different plant cultures being able to coexist in a very small space. I suppose that's rather
Yes.
wonderful, that intensification, isn't it? And that's what you sort of get a sense of in this project. It's this creating a microcosm of all the flora and this idea of the oasis as being the blood and soul of the whole country, isn't it? That's where all the life is.
It is. It is.
Yeah.
Completely. And then again, the celebration. I mean, I wish I could play the sound. It's full of birds, and the fact that we now have beehives allowed to be there, right? I think that is really amazing, and that is why
I'm so sorry, Rasmus. Rasmus, I'm so sorry, but I'm really being asked to wrap it up here. So
Yeah.
I need to do that.
Don't be sorry,
thank you very
I'm talking
much
too much.
Thank you so much.
And we could
Thank
talk.
you so much.
We could talk longer. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Bye.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I like that too. Bye.
Thank you.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.